this is.
No, I mean, again, every single week, it's a Skype thing. It's the number at the top left of the screen when you record a Skype video. For me, I don't feel comfortable starting talking until that kicks in, because that would be like I start immediately talking and like a quarter of like my introduction would be cut off, and then I'd have to like record it again, and re-recording stuff is not fun. But anyway, hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim Jousma, and with me as always I have the holiest of holies. I have the Reverend Tracy. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well, just busy. It's no secret. The move is impending. We've mentioned I'm moving in the summer, and so we're starting to kind of like get stuff packed and get ready, and hijinks and selling stuff on Facebook in the lovely warm weather that we've finally gotten to experience.
Yeah, I've heard you've been hustling today. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually got the staged closet cleared out. No, it's really kind of funny because I'm trying to use an app. I try not to bring up specific names just to avoid just any bullshit that could be a repercussion of like, you can't slander our company. But I will use I'm totes selling this app is what I'll just call it. So I'm totes selling this app, right? Like I put things up there and I put like very clearly that I'm firm on pricing. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, like I might get desperate in July, but if it's still like here in April and May, I'm pretty much expecting what I'm asking for, because I'm not asking for a lot of money. But right. It is just so funny between that and like just selling it through like Facebook Marketplace, like the difference of just immediately, okay, I'll give you $40 for this thing you said you wanted $80 for. And I'm like, no, I like just posted this an hour ago. Like, go away.
Oh, God. I remember one time I put up a phone I was selling on Facebook, an old iPhone, like 5S or something like that. And like the price I put up was a low price. But then somebody came back and offer you $15 for it. I'm like, yeah, kindly fuck off. And then they responded, you'll be lucky to get this, man. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't care what you have to say. This is what I'm offering it for. If you don't like the price, move on. I don't need a lecture from a douchebag like you.
Yeah, and you know what? It's like I also have had the confidence to tell people before. It's like, well, I mean, you're free to see if this posting is still up, like in July-ish. Like, if it's here later in June, sure, reach out to me. But other than that, like, I'm sticking firm because this is a lot of like the budget that goes into moving. You right. Take some of that money and you put it into that budget. So yeah, it's been good wheeling and dealing and getting stuff like progress making and things like that. And plus, there's just something about it's springtime and cleaning anyway, like where this is just kind of a natural thing you want to do, or me anyway. Like if you're gonna clean, it's gonna be maybe because it's sunnier out and you kind of want to like release some shit. I'm not a big hoarder, I guess, but I don't know. I've enjoyed it. Like some of the bonus people interaction, because hey, there are actually a lot of nice people out there. Just throwing that out there. Like most people are trying their best, and some cool like brief interactions with humanity to remind me that not everybody is internet trolls, because we all know about my just short venture into trying to be socially interactive on the internet. Yeah. Didn't go super well. It happened again, by the way, like in a plant-based recipe group, like some random bullying over oil I had included in a recipe. Like, so yes, basically that's to say I gave up on the internet, guys. No offense. I'm going to stay in my friends group and I'm going to stay in the Friends Talking Nerdy group, but I don't think I can interact with internet people.
Well, now you have to tell us what happened in the plant group.
Oh gosh, so this is a group that it's like plant-based on a budget. Like that's not the exact name of it, but it's supposed to be like plant-based recipes and budget. And I'm a big bulk buyer. I'm a big like especially because of this pandemic, right? Like that's a lot of what I do that's helped maintain my ability to not have to work at a place that had OSHA complaints against it. Just throwing that out there. Like that was my choice. That's where I went, nah, I'm gonna stay at home. Was that office situation. But
Right.
yeah, so I decided to stay at home, and a lot of that was like buying the ingredients and making things myself. And so when you like make your own bread and make your own everything, muffins, cookies, blah blah, it makes sense to get like a 50-pound bag of flour and just like process it. Because it makes it way less expensive to have all of the things you like, and since I'm at the house, it made sense to maybe do that some. So anywho, I've got some hacks for that, and it was kind of neat to share those for a while and sharing like some of the awesome recipes that I make and stuff like that. Lo and behold, we get to the ranch epidemic thing, like the ranch situation, I guess is what I should call it. It was the ranch situation, and I was like, yeah, I'm putting the recipe in the comments, whatever. And so there's oil in it, and I guess there's eating styles. I need to put my pinky up for this conversation, I feel, because it's kind of like how you've got people who eat vegan and people who are vegans. And there's just no offense to anybody who chooses to like be completely leather product free. Like, I'm not saying everybody who chooses that is that way about it. But I'm sure like most people have met that person who's just very kind of into their choice of being vegan, like almost in an uppity way. But you could say that about anything, like veganism, paleo diet, like really that mentality, right?
Reminds me of this OkCupid profile I saw of this woman who says, I only want to meet up with vegans and fellow vegans. If you eat meat of any kind, I will swipe left on you.
Oh my gosh. I mean, everybody's got a right to express their price of admission, right, for a relationship, but there are attitudes that you can have about it. And I agree that I have come across that in other ways where I'm like, you know what, you could pitch that like in a slightly different way and it'll be like 90% less bitchy sounding.
Right.
But yeah, like, so basically I feel like I got encountered by a bunch of those people who are like, oh, but oil is not whole food, plant based. Like, I could hear it in my head that's how they sounded to me. So it just turned into this whole thing. And then it was really kind of sweet though, because there were a lot of people in that group that were really supportive. It was like, oh my gosh, this poor person is just like trying to share a recipe and they're having to deal with all of you people like telling her how dare she use oil or whatever. So it was tight. It wasn't anything like I didn't have a hissy fit or feel like overly bullied about. I was just like, really? Like, over recipes we're gonna get all shamey and oh my god, this one's in the wrong group. Like,
that brings to mind a YouTube video that I saw this past week that I sent you the link to. It was from Lindsay Ellis. We referenced it briefly last week, but she is like a YouTube content creator. And she made the sin of stating on Twitter that she thinks the Disney movie Raya and the Last Dragon is like similar to Avatar: The Last Airbender. And then people went nuts and started accusing her of being like a racist, and like any like tweet that they could find from her entire history on Twitter, they like did a deep dive and found, and they found some stuff, but in the video she ends up going over point by point the stuff they brought up, and how her point wasn't to defend some of the silly things she said. It was just to point out how just online it seems like these companies thrive. The algorithms are made in such a way to try and keep you on there. It's like an addiction, and one way they can do that, and the best way to do that, is through negativity. She mentioned they call it doom scrolling for a reason, and I find myself too like there was a guy on Twitter today that like posted something really fucking stupid about how in the 90s white people listened to gangster rap and it was okay, and it just like trying to pretend like the 90s were some racial utopia. And my instinct was to like do a quote tweet of I was just going to put a gif. There's a common gif of Bender from Futurama laughing, and with a comment of ha ha ha, oh, I see you're serious, let me laugh harder, ha ha ha. And I thought about it, and then I hit delete because it was just like, that guy doesn't know me, he's a fucking moron. But come on, what is it
Yeah.
going to help for me to do that? I would just be making a bad situation worse and giving his stupidity
Yeah.
fire,
Because then you're just like I said, it's so tempting. And I understand because there was a point where like, yeah, sure, I did get a little involved in that one little fight. Now, I didn't say anything, I think, over a line or anything, like, but I'm not that human over there reading from their
Yeah.
perspectives. So, but it just went back to like, yep, this is why I don't do comments like anymore on public stuff unless it's like a dumb like which two restaurants would you like get rid of or have on your island or whatever. Like those are safe. Those are just silly. I don't know. I just did one for Texas admitting that I put beans in my chili, so I might get all of the hatred of Texas in my direction.
Oh, no, after you were able to corral them together to fight for their honor in the battle for state supremacy, too.
They voted for Willie Nelson, so.
Yeah, well, if they only knew they were voting for beans, not the cap.
Yeah, if only they knew that they were voting for a Texan who left the state and makes chili with beans in it. Oh my gosh, could you imagine if they knew I made vegan chili?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our YouTube viewers can see Tracy just took a sip of a beverage. Tell folks what that is.
Oh, no, it's just my ginger beer. Tim had made a comment about how I had a beer on the ready, and I was like, oh, no, like, this is a ginger beer. This is the only cold ones we buy in our house. I personally don't do alcohols. I used to. I don't anymore, and it wasn't that it was ever really a problem, like, for me. Like, I didn't get in trouble. Like most people quit like because something happened. Like it either like led to a relationship falling apart or, shit got crazy at a party and they like urinated in public or something, There's a lot of reasons like people end up quitting. Mine was just like I realized maybe it's just not the best. Like if you're somebody with anxiety and depression, like maybe just there's some studies that have maybe implied that having alcohol can affect that in a negative way. So I just decided to stop, like at all, like because you knew me, like when I was still drinking, I wasn't really like a drunker person, but I had like my vodka tonic when I did Murder Mystery, like just to be in character, and it wasn't even for nerves or anything. It wasn't even enough to do anything to me. It was just like, yeah, sure, I have this drink. So I don't know. I stopped doing that because every Friday is somewhat regular to do that, and no offense to anybody who does have those things and does drink sometimes. I'm not saying you're wrong. Just that's why I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat too. I not that I feel I ever drank to excess ever, but like my latter days at Apple, for instance, I was usually down to like a couple of beers at the end of the night each night, and just with everything that was going on there, it was just like, yeah, maybe I can find some more healthier ways to kind of deal with this stress than alcohol,
Yeah, like I'm big on the whole cortisol buster thing, and maybe if we do like another mental health, like or mental hygiene type topic, I can go more into it. But that's been something I have been nerding out about on the side. That's what I do. That's how I manage a lot of the mental health stuff anyway. Is just basically nerding out about concepts as they come across my stupid noodle. And if my meat computer don't know, and because I'm not into therapy, I just go to the internet. So, but it's I just don't. It's worked for me, especially not doing it every Friday for a show, and then like once a week with my friends back when I used to play Ingress. Like that was a really fun game back in the day. But we'd meet up and have happy hour, and I'd have a beer. Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, I know that bar we went to that one time, or meeting up with your Ingress friends. I don't know if that bar's there anymore.
Oh God, I don't know what's in downtown anymore. Like since I left the tech industry, and then like that was I haven't been there really since the before times. So
I've been by there a few times, and we're gonna talk about some great things that have happened downtown this past week from there. But I'm kind of going back to what you were talking about with the internet as well. I mean, I'm at the point too. Yeah, it does not make sense to really try to get relationships online with people you don't know. Doesn't mean you shouldn't try if things do work out, but just I heard something on social media that just makes a lot of sense to me, and that's anything you put on social media, you should be 100% comfortable being able to say that to a cop. And yeah, just I think we're at a point at social media to where unless you are willing to get in the mud and contribute to the hate, it's not a fun place.
Yeah, I mean, and you got to realize too, like, social media right now is a lot of people's social interactions at all. Like, there's still a lot of people working from home who used to go into an office every day, or, maybe they do Lyft or Uber or Postmates or some other like app type job where they're just not around people as much anymore because, for whatever reason. And I could even see like traffic in stores being slower. It's changed a lot of people's lives, like, since the whole pandemic thing. So I've seen a lot of stuff kind of expressing like, hey, by the way, like, we're all kind of going through a trauma together right now. Like, this is it fits the definition, if you look it up, for a traumatic experience. So I'm trying to kind of put that in my brain when I come across the whole troll situation. It's like, hey, like, if you're not dealing with this well, I'm going to just I would like to give people that benefit of the doubt, I guess. Call me a sucker. Like, maybe this person wasn't this way like a year and a half ago, but this is just what's happened. This is some manifestation of like going through this, and this is how that person landed on dealing with it. And hopefully they get exposed to other options. I'll throw that out there, but it's not my job to assume that that's what's going on either.
And I get it, and I mean, I can definitely accept that because of the pandemic. Things are kind of like amplified in a way that they wouldn't normally be, just because people don't have as much have a lot more time on their hands than they did before, so they are diving to stuff like social media. And I think the more vaccines become prevalent and the world starts opening up more, then I think social media usage will still go down. Having said that, the way the algorithms are made on these services, they kind of thrive on the negativity. They want you impassioned and whatnot to keep you as a listener. Because like the Lindsay Ellis video again, she talked about how Twitter a long time ago reached a plateau with their users. They're not expected to. No social media company could ever realistically can have continued numbers. There will be a plateau for that, and because they've reached that plateau, they have to do what they can to keep the people there. And what better way to do that than profit off of negativity? Because one person brings up something stupid that somebody did, few retweets later, all of a sudden everybody's talking about it. And that doesn't mean people shouldn't be held responsible for what they say if they do say something stupid, but come on, think of it. Just people should sit back and think about all the times they've said something stupid in their lives, and just imagine how that could potentially be taken out of context. Like I brought up on the show before, when The Force Awakens first came out, I think I told you too. Yeah, and they had a story about a kid who had like terminal cancer or something like that, and Disney was kind enough to let him see the movie beforehand. And I typed, "I wish I had a terminal illness." People didn't, and how could they? They didn't know they didn't realize the fact that I was saying a joke. They didn't know me, and I could very well have been 100% serious. So it's like, it's like I put my foot in my mouth in that by typing that out. Now, if it was a friend, even if it was on the podcast here, being able to joke about, being able to say it like I did, I think people would get the fact that I was trying to make a joke. Whether they find it funny or not is up to them. That's not up to me. But, they would at least understand that I wasn't serious. But a lot of people don't take the time, and I didn't at the time, obviously, to think about that. And it's a minefield. There's so much beautiful stuff that can happen on social media in terms of, like what we do, for instance, getting the word out about the show, meeting new people. I did listen to Pixie's podcast, by the way, and she totally got her podcast name wrong. There's another podcast called Talking Nerdy with Friends out there that started after we did, and I think they probably took their name because of how we have our name. So they got the plug and not us. But the fact that, social media allowed us to be able to reach out and, get her as a guest and get previous guests on there, there's a lot of good that can happen. But at the end of the day, I think the social media companies need some heavy regulation.
Yeah, like to me, it's kind of a bummer because the person that got kind of, creepy about it, like intentionally went on there and tried to name some stuff. I talked about that last time, so I won't go into it again. But I will at least say, like, I found it surprising that that's not behavior that they care about at all. Like, even though that was clearly intended to intimidate and possibly elicit fear in me. That they don't care about because it doesn't meet probably some tick list that they go, welp, it didn't say a curse word, and welp, it wasn't talking about anybody's ethnicity, welp, and it wasn't, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure that is really just as formulated as it is. It's not personal to me. They didn't go and read it and care about context. Right. But that's the thing that I think they should totally care about, because those are the things that are kind of causing some of the harm and the damage and kind of that equivalency of internet bullying. So, like, and watching it at all would inherently help, like, the whole epidemic of it happening with kids. Where, bullying used to be, like, something that only happened at school. It's actually kind of one of my problems with public school, but now it's, like, kind of permeated into that. So, really, if you think about, like, if we did it for the kids, I could also see where it would just be beneficial as a society, because people that want to do creep or intimidating things to somebody that they perceive as a woman and weaker than them can maybe, like, not be part of that internet social media world, and then you don't have to worry about that behavior being taught to your kids. Yeah. So just saying, I could see it benefiting, like, a few demographics.
It definitely would, and it is high time that the social media companies had some form of regulation, because their whole, we'll make sure we fix it, we promise. How many times can a company say that before you call shenanigans, and how many people have to die? Because speaking of social media companies, Ted Nugent, paragon of virtue that he is. One of my choices for the Battle of State Supremacy. I will defend him as a musician. He's a great musician, but as a quote-unquote intelligent human being, that's a different story altogether. He recently came out after more than a year of calling coronavirus a hoax, making fun of people that wore masks, protesting in Michigan and in Texas against mask mandates. He announced he got the coronavirus.
How's he doing with it? Because I don't
He's I guess on the upswing, and being Ted Nugent with some of the people he knows, I'm sure he probably was able to get his hands on some type of medicine that you or I would not have been able to. But he survived it. But like anybody that I've heard that tried to deny it and then ended up getting it later, it was the end of the world. I thought it was horrible for him, and I'm sure it was, because coronavirus kicks people in the ass, and it's not a flu. It's not something you just get through and then, once it's out of your system, you're better a lot of times. Social media.
Still haven't actually started looking into long corona, guys. Sorry. And you can Google that on your own if you want to. But go ahead. It's out there. I don't need to take it's not hard to educate yourself on it. But yeah, long corona. Just check it out. It's just worth educating on if anybody wants to.
Yeah.
But he got it, huh? Got the vid, didn't have all the injections to prop him up as a, livable human, I guess. So maybe he felt it a little bit more than certain other people that got it at some point.
Yeah. No, I don't know. He's just, he's mentally gone. I mean, he's been gone for years, but just like, I posted a link in the Facebook group of an episode of the podcast Knowledge Fight. And that's a show that kind of monitors the Alex Jones show and does comments on, particular days' episodes. And they played one interview that Alex Jones with Ted Nugent and his son Rocco. And my God. If there are two human beings that are physically on Earth, but their heads are elsewhere, it's Nugent and his son. Just they are just gone. That's the only way I can describe it. At the end of the day, it sucks that he got it. I wish we had responsible people in government at the time when it first hit that would have mitigated a lot of the disaster that we're facing today. But you know what? For somebody that went out of his way to deny it and to fight efforts to protect people, I don't have sympathy for him. But kind of going back to the point for the social media companies, they're allowing this type of talk to run freely on all their systems. And how many people have needlessly died because of that? How many people? And what does it say about our country too, that people would rather believe that like there are microchips in the vaccine that are put there by Bill Gates? That sounds reasonable, but regular science, it doesn't. I don't get it.
There's some interesting studies that have been done on like the mentality or possibly some underlying reasons that might contribute to somebody's likelihood of believing in a conspiracy theory, because I do put that is obviously conspiracy theory level stuff. Like,
yeah,
there was a really funny meme that I saw a while back ago that just perfectly like captured how silly that kind of is, because it's not necessary, but it's like all these people are worried about microchips in the vaccine. Meanwhile, they readily and are totally okay with having a cell phone on their person pretty much constantly, or your Fitbit smartwatch, or your Garmin, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
There's all of this. If they really wanted to microchip and like monitor everything, like, and even some of it's come out, like how they totally do have access to some stuff. Like, it's kind of interesting that's what the concern is. Like, so is it really that concern, or is it possibly having an issue like with the control over it because they just don't want to have it? Like, it's just, there's a lot of interesting like theory out there. Like I said, there's studies, if you want to look into some of the psychology stuff they found on like, hey, why do certain people, like, what is with the prevalence in conspiracy theory believers? So, and it's like they talk about even, maybe I'll have to find this, because I'd read somewhat recently about talking about like, oh, people think that, conspiracy theories are more prevalent now because of social media, but really they've kind of always existed. They're very well grounded in like our history. So it's just more likely that more people agree rather than having so many different ones. Does that make sense? Like, instead of kind of making up their own for other things, it just gives them that idea. So there's speculation on if it's making it worse, or if it's just more making it like less smaller conspiracies and just more people believe the same ones because they're not making up their own like in individual groups anymore.
Well, I think part of it does have to do with technology in place. I mean, it's not that you're right. Before the internet, it's not that people didn't believe in conspiracy theories, but now they have the ability of connecting with each other in much easier ways than they used to in the past. So it's different than the old days that where maybe you would run across a person or two that believed something conspiratorial, whether there's some actual truth in that, or if it's some of the outlandish stuff. But the fact that we have all of these internet web pages, like the Q documentary Into the Storm is about stuff like this, to where people that just believe some weird stuff congregate together, and they congregate from all over the world in one place, and that was thanks to the internet. So I think it's just the technology is giving these people the tools to actually speak, which is spreading these far faster than they would have before.
True. I mean, but it goes into that blessing and cursedness of it all, right? Because where there's that, there's also, like, if it weren't for the internet, I don't know if I would have ever been connected to start the organization I'm involved with starting, or getting into some of the involvement of trying to make changes. So it's that blessing curse, right? Because if you take away it all, there's the argument that you would lose that part of it too. But now, would I be completely opposed to joining a website that did maybe kind of do better about editing stuff, like ensuring that, false information, conspiracy theories, things that like defy science? Because I like science, guys. I'm not ashamed to admit that I like science. You can actually like there's access to it. You can learn things.
Yeah.
The journal for science or whatever, like you can actually go and search like their articles and stuff and read a lot of stuff like without necessarily having a membership. So I don't know. I think with access to knowledge, it makes sense to me to maybe be willing to take down things if you know that it has kind of been proven. But just because it's a platform, like their number one thing is free speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
They say, well, free speech. Like, well, here's the thing: a Facebook membership is not a right.
No,
They did like Twitter is not a right. Like, so yes, you can totally decide to make these rules. You're not defying somebody's constitutional right necessarily by not allowing them to post things that are false. Like it's just something that I haven't been convinced of yet that.
Well, to me, it boils down to the typical argument you would get with free speech. Where does it cut off? And usually with most people, it's going to be the whole you can't say fire in a crowded building type of deal. And if we're talking, like a group of Nazis talking about Nazi stuff, they're scumbags, but if they have a thing to congregate, fine, as long as they're not making plans to go out and kill people. If they're just talking Nazi stuff, whatever, let them do their thing. But once we start going down the road of stuff like you saw in 8chan, to where you have people say I'm going to kill people and then give the actual proof with live video of that, that's the problem. Or on a lesser extent, like what happens on Facebook on a daily basis, of these people passing along clearly incorrect information, and at most you'll get like a little banner at the bottom of these are the facts about coronavirus, and if people don't believe it anyway, are they really going to click that? No. It's theater. That's all Facebook did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I were to give the Reverend's opinion, I think there is a big difference, and this is something that's gotten really blurry, but there is a difference between opinion and fact. I have no problem with people stating opinions and things that they think are happening or what have you. But when you start passing opinions as facts, I think that's when you start crossing that line. Right. I have no problem with people sharing opinions. I have no problem with people openly sharing things that they feel are a conspiracy theory, or if for some reason there's like an alternative word for that is less offensive, I'm open to calling it that too. I just don't know of any. But like, there's a big difference between just expressing something you believe and saying this is fact, because there's even something psychological, like even on a level of gaslighting with what some people do. We've talked about that with the meme making. Like, that's why I try to be careful who I follow and what I kind of, put into my life, because when you read this is this, that is essentially a form of mental programming for you. This isn't surprising. We know like the importance of self-talk now. So that's where my humble opinion is, because see, I'm expressing an opinion, is that you need to be clear about when it is an opinion you're expressing versus a fact you are sharing. And we need to kind of de-blur that line, because that's what I personally feel has been really blurred. That's caused a lot of this. You can't take down what I think. Well, but you're not posing it as if you think it. You're posing it like it is fact, which is gaslighty.
I mean, it makes me think that, that Section 230 that Trump harped on in terms of wanting to get rid of, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea if that were the case. Because if these companies become liable for the actions that their customers say on there, then maybe they would have some changes. And again, I'm not saying in terms of quieting people with views I don't like, I mean, because like I don't want to hear Nazis, but again, this is America. They have a First Amendment right to speak, but the problem comes again if we have Nazis that are, using Twitter to congregate, whether through DMs or regular tweet, to talk about shooting, talk about hurting people, or you have groups that are consistently putting out false information about vaccines and stuff like that. When it affects me, when it affects the general public, when people could be in danger, then these companies should be held responsible if they don't do anything.
Exactly. I actually agree with that too, because that is clear, right? Like the violence thing is clear. And I'm pretty sure even, Facebook and Twitter, like I think they do have like some very clear terms, like terms of service, where you can't say, like, you can't enact violence or something, because haven't they used that to pull things down? I don't know. I behave for the most part on the internet. I've never been in Facebook jail. I've never gotten
the thing with
pulled.
The thing with Facebook is like any other massive corporation out there. When they have a public relations thing like this occur, they will be put in front of Congress. Mark Zuckerberg will be there and talk about all the changes, the systemic changes that they're going to do. And yet nothing changes. There was an article I read that, it was Robert Reich posted it. And if I find it, I'll put it in the group. But, he talked about that, Facebook talked one thing about trying to stop, right-wing, far right-wing people, talking about, taking over the Capitol and whatnot. But behind the scenes, they did not. They did the exact opposite of what they said they were going to do. That is not to say that people at Facebook, necessarily supported it, but they took the mindset of, these people are bringing business to us, and they just thought of it like that and didn't care about the ramifications. They're like that douchebag attorney Alan Dershowitz, who just is a slimy fuck of a lawyer who just constantly he poses his things as just like what ifs and whatnot, but he's the guy who helped Trump, he helped OJ, just all the sleazy, slimy, and he knew Jeffrey Epstein, was best buddies with him, and fuck that guy. Yeah. Oh, I need to change the topic. Let me talk about my cats.
Talk about your cats.
Yes.
Calm kitty.
Yeah. We got two of them. We got Sherman, big gray cat, kind of like a jock, if I had to describe him, fun loving, but sometimes he will, what are you going to do? What are you going to do type of guy. And then you got my Phil, who is just kind of mellow, laid back and whatnot. And I've had some concerns about Phil with his weight for a bit. So we wanted to try something this week in terms of I wanted to try some soft food with him in the morning and at night to see if I can kind of bulk him up. And I realized with a second cat there, it would not be fair to not have something for him. So what I've done is just kind of let Phil get his fair share, but then, let Sherman get in when he can. And this morning was funny. First of all, I tried to get the food for Phil without Sherman knowing, but of course, cats with their hearing open up the can, and he just ran directly into the room. And, so I put the food in the bowl, put it in front of Phil. Phil starts eating, and then Sherman does this wonderful thing. He looks at Phil, looks at him, and then takes his paw and then taps Phil on the head. It wasn't a swat. It was just a tap. And it was just like, are you done now?
Can I have a turn?
Yeah. So he did that. And that was fun. That was funny that he did. But, thankfully, I think with Phil, it's just me being kind of a helicopter parent, because when I first got him, they said that they suspected he might have like a thyroid issue. But now he's 14. He's 14, and I think you've seen him. I mean, he's a small, skinny cat, but he's always looked that way, and his demeanor hasn't changed since the day I got him. So more than likely, I was probably just being overcautious. But at the very least, they're going to get a week of good soft food. But it's just weird what cats will do. And like Sherman too, like ever since he got the cone off, he's been super nice. But what will happen is, like, when I get ready for school, I do school on the same computer I do the show on. So I'm sitting here, and then all of a sudden I feel like a tap on my leg. He's tapping my leg, and he wants to hop up in my seat and get me to pat him. And I have to do that because the one time I tried to pick him up and put him on the couch to get back to work, he hissed at me.
Ooh.
Yeah, but that's the thing with a cat. You can't take a hiss personally. personally at all. It's just they're just telling you, they're throwing
it's a communication thing. That's literally all they've got, guys. They've got purrs, they've got hisses, they've got swiping. Just understand it's their communication. Learn how to read it, and it's not too bad. I've had to have that conversation with my stepkids. You know, because my stepson will get hesitant around my cat, and of course the instinct is to draw that hand away. Well, what's that do to the cat? Ooh, toy, or ooh, prey animal. So you know, it's not. She's not trying to be offensive when she swipes at you, little man. It's just what cats do. She thinks it's a plaything. You know, so it's just take your hand and calmly take it away. But yeah, I changing food can help a lot sometimes with the cat, just in general. I switched over to wet food for my cat, except I make it. So that's I couldn't afford staying on wet food for her. So I was like, you know what? I wonder how crazy it would be to make cat food for my cat. Because it goes back to the other conversation I was talking about earlier with, I bulk buy trying to save money. So the same thing happens, right? I'm feeding a cat during a pandemic, and it's oh man, I think I need to put her on wet food for reasons. And it's well, crud, how do I make this affordable?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe that could be a recipe if I do the Reverend cooks. I can do the Reverend makes cat food.
On YouTube, there we go.
Yeah, there we go.
I noticed with my cats too that with the hard food, the common cat complaint you have of people, and I know I've put a meme up a couple. It's two different memes, but this conveying the same thing of a cat that has a thin layer of food at the bottom of the bowl, but they act like there's no food there. But I thought about it one day though, and I actually looked at the food, and what I realized is that what I ended up trying and what ended up working was I actually switched to smaller bowls. Because what I realized was that I think the reason that my cats ended up not eating the bottom layer of food is that the hard food after a time will dry out. And so it's probably not appealing. Now, granted, if they were really, really hungry, I'm sure they would go for it. But that would be like saying, the sandwich that you made for dinner last night that you left on the counter may be good this morning, So it's with your cat, what I found, they have their own unique way of communicating, but if you listen to them and go and if you're listening to them and go on their speed, most cats are going to fall in love with you or at least tolerate you. It's just they're the ultimate consent machine. If they don't consent to something, good luck. And was it you who had that meme of the famous instances in art history of people trying to give a pill to their cat?
Of Hercules trying to give a pill to his cat because there's all these different statues of Hercules fighting this lion, and so it's just really great. If you've ever tried to give a pill to a cat, not mine. My cat she essentially was therapy trained. I didn't do it anywhere officially. I just did it, I hand trained her myself. So she is kind of an interesting little angel in that way and kind of puts up with anything I do with her because it's just how she was trained. I shared that. I shared a little bit of a story there about, my cat. She has a microchip. And whenever I took her in to get the microchip, I guess the office dog jumped up on the table with my cat. And the vet was telling me just how astonished they were that my cat just really didn't seem to care. Because usually a cat in that kind of situation would be really stressed out. You got a bunch of hands on you and making you stay still. And I'm like, no. I had an autistic nephew that was going to be around my cat. So I wanted to make sure that she could handle being tugged on and pulled on. So it's just, I looked it up. How do you autistic train with animals? And it's if you've got them young enough, get them used to being pulled on if you can, because that's kind of what they do with some of the therapy animals. I was like, oh, interesting. Goes back to the blessing of the internet, right? You can actually learn some cool stuff if you find some cool, trustworthy sources. But and then I do have another thing that's kind of a blessing of the internet. If we're cool with changing the topic again, if you had nothing else.
Well, fill us in. This is exciting news.
Yeah. So I am excited to be able to share that the Haunters Convention, the West Coast Haunters Convention, is happening this year. It's actually happening the weekend of May 1st. So very, very soon. It is 100% online. It's virtual, and it is also 100% free this year. This is normally a fairly large event. So it's not as many classes. Like they kind of have some tracks, like you get into a virtual track and then you can watch the classes throughout the day. But this is normally something that you would have to pay like a pretty penny to be able to go and then go to the classes. Usually there'd be this big trade floor or whatever, and I guess they're trying to do a virtual trade floor, so some deals there if you're looking for like, hey, you want to get cool contacts for Halloween this year? That's the place to do it if you can get into the trade floor at a Haunters convention. But anywho, so all online, all free. They are basically like run. They're a nonprofit. And they are accepting donations, but they're not required. So I did want to share because I do think it's really cool, and they've talked about this a lot, and I've met some of the haunt actors that are from these situations. But just in case you're curious, because even if you don't want to do the Haunters Con or see the free online ball, which I am going to try to do FX makeup with my stepdaughter and have fun there. So I might go to the online ball. But anywho, all of the proceeds from the convention and its events go to actually support teachers and other professionals that work with deaf, hard of hearing, and autistic students throughout the Northwest. Over the past few years, they have given out thousands of dollars in grants to help deaf and or autistic children in the area. So that's what you're giving to when you support this convention. I'll share it, probably a link with you so you could put it in the show notes or what have you, but it's hauntersconvention.com, and it should say West Coast Haunters Convention like on that website. Cool. It's a good time. I'll actually share one of the professional photographers pulled me to the side and asked for a photo when I did my effects for the charity ball that I went to. Nice. So I will gladly share those photos. It was wicked. I even have some of the in process, like before I was done with the whole look photo. But yeah, so I'll happily share that. Hauntersconvention.com if you've ever been curious what those things can be like. And they kind of have classes a little bit for everything too. Like even if you are a person who just wants to decorate your house for Halloween or do like a little yard haunted house, like, and also for like the stuff like I do/did where it's a bigger haunt attraction. Like there's kind of a little bit of everything for everybody. Right. How to build costumes, how to work with foam. Like you'll probably find something interesting. With it being free, I am totally encouraging people to check it out.
And you said the trade floor would have deals as well. Now, how would you compare this to something like the panels at like a Comic-Con? Is it more in depth because everybody is there for one thing and Comic-Con may have different reasons for people showing up?
Haunt-themed Comic-Con. I would kind of think of it that way because with Comic-Con, you've got everything. Like the ones that I went to was about building the costumes. Mm-hmm. Right? Like how to build a really good costume, like starting from a core. Meanwhile, like other people are more interested in the panels with all of the famous people that were maybe doing autographs on the floor. So at the Haunters Con, you might have stuff like, hey, this is how to make a character and bring that character to life and scare the piss out of people or entertain. It's not just scaring. There's also acting 101 classes, like haunting 101 classes at some of these things. Mm-hmm. But then there's also like panels for FX people. For example, in the before times, the ones that I'll be sharing these pictures from, that's when I got to meet V. Neal. And for any of you guys that don't know V. Neal, you probably know the work she has done because she did the look for Mrs. Doubtfire. Like she made that prosthetic and put that on Robin Williams' face. She also did Michael Keaton's Beetlejuice. So very iconic look. She's very well known. She was on a panel one time, but she was also there on the floor and like she had products and stuff like that. It was really cool getting to meet her. I didn't know, and I guess I talked about this in episode 100 as well.
You did.
But yes, I did get to meet V. Neal very briefly, and I met her on the trade floor, and then I didn't know that she was also going to be judging the costume contest. It was I had no intention of entering a costume contest when I showed up. It was the haunted house, one of the owners that just said, "Oh yeah, just go and stand in line. Like it's okay. You didn't have to like enter ahead of time." And like as soon as I walked off, like they had made a joke at the table about, "Do you think she knows that V. Neal is one of the judges?" And he was like, "No." So, I go in there with one of the, FX queens. I would call her, like, very well known for what she does in our
Yeah.
community, especially. Like, come on, Beetlejuice and Haunters Convention. Of course, people know who V. Neal is. And she also did Face Off. Which was a reality show. I haven't gotten to see it, but I want to. But she has some of the face-off pictures.
It is on Peacock, I believe. Peacock actually has a free option. There are a number of high-quality shows that are on there, so give it a check. You may be able to watch Face-Off on there for free.
Fine, I will figure it out. I think it's just something I need to figure out with my settings, because I don't think it should be asking me for a password every time. But there's just something.
Yeah,
exactly. It's something with my cablecompany.com website person needs to help me with, I think. But
it's not an ID10T error, as we called it in the business.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not aware of any, just a really quick on the Haunters Con, I wanted to be clear, like, you can go and check and see if there's any big guests. As far as I know, I didn't see any, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any. I don't know if they're doing the costume contest or anything this year, but I fully invite people to go check it out. You'll have, like, when this comes out on Saturday, you'll have about a week to kind of figure it out, because, hey, it's not going to fill up and sell out. It's virtual. It'll be a good time.
And the thing to keep in mind with stuff like this is that if you even have the tiniest of mustard seed size inkling of potentially getting into the business at all, or just learning some of these tips and tricks, let's say you make your own homemade movies, for instance, why not? This is free. Why not sign up for these? Take these classes, learn, because the big thing about something like a con like this is the networking. If you're able to meet up with somebody and strike up a relationship from there, you may not necessarily meet a V. Neal. That may be unrealistic, but what if it's a local person in Portland that you meet up? If you're going to a Portland one, you have a conversation, and all of a sudden you have a foot in the door. That's why you attend stuff like this. So definitely take advantage of it.
Oh, yeah, and especially if you do anything with production value, because they build sets. Like, that's a lot of what people in the haunt community do. So you will have, like, a panel of haunted house directors that you can talk to. Like, how do you pick themes, etc.? How do you, like, stay on the pulse of, like, what's going to be interesting this year? There's also people that are like, hey, I build the sets for these major haunted houses. Hey, what is the favorite, like, foam to work with if you work with building with foam? Or what is your favorite, like, way to build big scenes when you don't have a lot of, space for doing that, or necessarily the tools? So that's where you can, like, really get into the brains of some of these people, which is funny since it's a haunt con and brains. But but yes, there will not be a conga line led by Nick the Zombie this year. But
only in spirit.
Only in spirit. I will definitely have to find that video now that it's just crossed my noggin. It's so awesome, because Nick the Zombie is somebody who is a person that he doesn't have any of his limbs. I don't know the story to this, but he really gets into the character of dressing up as a zombie and usually hangs out. I've seen him at Comic-Con. I've seen him at Haunters Con every year that I had been there. And he used to really freak me out, because I think I've told you I'm scared of zombies. It is just something that I don't do well with. And I used to really avoid him, but I was so proud of myself because I talked myself into saying hi the last time I saw him. But he does this really awesome thing where he just, like, totally crawls around on the floor, like, with all of the tattered, like, clothing and the full zombie makeup and the prosthetic and everything. Nick the Zombie, totally look him up. He's wonderful. He's a Portland treat. Yeah. I wish he were as well known as the unicycler guy that does the dark.
The Unipiper.
Yeah, the Unipiper. Thank you. I wish he was as well known as him, but he deserves it. He's so cool.
Oh, the Unipiper. Like, within the first week after I moved here in 2015, when I worked at that wonderful place downtown, with the glass walls and all that, it was near July 4th, and I looked out the window, and there's a guy on a unicycle dressed as Uncle Sam playing John Philip Sousa on the bagpipes, and it was like, welcome home. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah, just completely random, but he's definitely a local celebrity here. And I know he's been to a few Comic Cons as well. It does his thing riding around. Definitely a fun guy. But yeah, go to something like this. Go network, have fun. That's
Yes.
what these are for.
Learn, absorb, and by all means, if you do have anything that you want to give to that 50 to their nonprofit, they've actually got a link on their website. They're very clear everywhere about, you can donate. If you do want to donate or have it to donate and want to support them, like, it's amazing. There is a haunted house that's very much in that community that is ran by a deaf school. And there's also one like that's the school for the blind that does a haunted house. And come on, when you've got people who are used to navigating with no light, like, getting to rule, it's just kind of neat. The people, like, you get really surprised at the people you meet in that community. A lot of really awesome folks, especially at this particular con. It's the one I've been to, so I can definitely speak to this one. So yeah, I definitely encourage checking it out, and I'm definitely going to share the Facebook page or whatever for Nick the Zombie, just if you don't know who he is.
Nice. Now, this past week we did have some pretty amazing news out of Minneapolis. The verdict is in for the Derrick Chauvin trial, the cop who mercilessly had his knee on George Floyd's death and just callously, stood there while the man died for no reason other than he could, was found guilty on all 3 counts. So, first of all, yay.
Yay.
Good news there. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack with that, not only with some of the response we've seen in the media to that, but also locally here in Portland, some of the response we've seen here too. But we'll start off when you heard the news, what'd you think?
I will constantly probably remind people I don't follow everything like that. I didn't even know this was coming up. My watch told me, because I'm still subscribed to the BBC breaking news for the United States, because I figure if the BBC says it's actually breaking news, it's actually breaking news. So, I saw that it's like, oh yeah, they're already done deliberating. Like, this was really short, and it's expected to be unanimous because of how short that it was. Right. And then, lo and behold, guilty, guilty, guilty. I didn't even know there were multiple counts. I wasn't following it that closely. It's something that I remembered hearing very little on it, like, early on, and just kind of deciding, like, oh yeah, that's not good. I was actually walking because selling stuff, I'm also selling things to some of my friends. So I got to walk and have a conversation about that. It was just like, I remembered hearing about, 9 minutes is a long time to be on somebody's neck. And that was pretty much all I needed to hear. Yeah. With knowing that there were other people there for me to go, I understand something about, like, the training. My mother was a detention officer. My stepdad was a detention officer. And, she kind of would teach us stuff because that was how she, whenever she was, like, working on learning the job and, like, all of the laws and everything. But, like, it just felt like a long time. And then as you learned that there were other people there, it's like, oh, that's definitely too long if there were other officers there. And then you learn that they were already handcuffed, and it's like, well, that's definitely not necessary at that point. And then that was pretty much where I stopped learning about the case. So yeah. I'm very relieved that this is how that went, because to me it felt like a no-brainer so early on that I almost forgot that it hadn't happened yet. Like, that this wasn't already a done deal. But so it kind of makes sense, though, because things take time. And
yeah, and I mean, the legal process needed to go through the normal machinations that they usually do. Me, when I got the news, I was in class at the time, so I couldn't really react to it right away. But definitely, happy for that news, because I was also happy because I did keep up with the trial somewhat. I was happy that they did have cops on the stand that did come out and say that what he did was not right. And because, more often than not, and I'm not going to say every cop, feels negative per se, but sometimes you could just have a thing to where if like 70% of your squad does a certain thing and you're part of 30% that disagrees with it, but if you say something that could affect your standing there, then that keeps people quiet. It was great to see that. It was even great on, I guess Tucker Carlson had a cop on, and the cop, dared say something along the lines of Derrick Chauvin, was out of line for doing what he did. And of course, Tucker Carlson went apoplectic because he's a fucking racist. Wink, wink, But it's like, this was good news. This was the right verdict, but there's a lot of stuff that happened. Like the big thing that really stuck in my craw was Maxine Waters, Congresswoman. I forgot where she's at, but she's commonly someone that likes to talk, and sometimes the things that come out of her mouth are not always the right things. And I don't have verbatim what she said, but basically what the gist of her message was, if they don't come back with a guilty plea, we got to do something. And again, I don't have the exact words here, so I'm not going to paraphrase, but I am confident that she did not have any intention of trying to imply that the people should be violent, but in the frame of mind that this country is in politically, what did Republicans do at the very first chance they could? And rightfully so. They attacked her for those words, and then what does it become at that point? It becomes just a distraction game. People want to talk about Maxine Waters. They want to talk about, like, here in Portland, some of the street violence that has happened here with some of the protests. It's like the story is shifting from let's talk about why people are protesting to let's only focus on what a few assholes are doing and say this represents everybody.
Yeah.
Which, if there are conservative people out there that are listening to this, and their first reaction to hearing me say that is, well, what about January 6th? I counter with, no, first of all, there is no official Antifa organization, but they're on their side. They have the Oath Keepers, they have the Proud Boys, they have the Boogaloo Boys. They have an organization that progressives don't. And again, it may have been a riot. It may have been stuff that they did illegally, but they're not causing an insurrection. The violence that happened here in Portland, they were not trying to get into City Hall to take over Portland. They were just, I don't agree with some of their actions, even though I did read on a website that one of the places that got burned in Portland was my old workplace. When I read that, I woke up and read that and I thought, wow, do dreams really come true? And I thought about what else can I try, and it didn't work. So, but yeah, just I don't like where the media is trying to portray this, because like speaking of Portland again, they on K2 they interviewed the owner of one of the jewelry stores downtown. It was on the same block as where you used to work, on the corner, like right across from Pioneer Square. And the guy was just talking about his business, like it matters that some windows were broken. Like it matters that the Apple store downtown was burned. Nobody was hurt, yet they're using this to kind of to distract from what people are protesting about, and that's police violence. And I just have the fear that once again, give it a week, give it or two, we will have people distracted enough that they won't end up doing anything to continue this fight, because this is not over. Racism is not over because this cop was found guilty.
No, it's not. And we're not even at the point yet where they're doing the appeals process, because that's going to happen. So I just, try to remain a little bit calm, because of course they're going to try to appeal. But so don't be too shocked if that does happen. I don't want to necessarily put a when it happens, but if it happens, I'm thinking it probably will. Just remain calm. It seemed to be so quick of a verdict that I think it will stick. So let's not get too distracted affected by that one and not focus on like other areas where there's still some injustice going on. Like that is going to play out. I don't think social media covering it, I don't think awareness around it is going to change his ability to appeal it. I just don't see it. But I mean, if you want to raise awareness when that appeal status is a thing, that is your choice. Where just you spend your energy where you really feel it, you know. But for me, it's like I want to focus on, like, I don't know, there's like a 13-year-old that got shot too, and like the guy that was like, it was a traffic thing, and you know the officer said taser and grabbed the gun by mistake. Like there's other things that, let's not lose kind of some of the momentum of looking at making some changes and making sure some things and some people are held accountable.
Because at the end of the day, George Floyd's family was given a settlement of $27 million from the city of Minneapolis. At the end of the day, sadly enough, it costs less for a city to dole out money from a settlement like this than it would for them to enact, meaningful changes that, could see verdicts like this essentially go away. That does not mean that there wouldn't be bad cops if there were some efforts at reform, but this is a continuous fight. If people are going to have, if every citizen in this country is going to have a fair shot at justice, no matter how bad they fucked up, we have to continue to fight. And it's good when we do have a victory like this, but don't rest on your laurels, because the Republican Party will do anything and everything that they can to distract you from what is the message actually is. Now, let's also talk, how do you feel about like what happened here in Portland in terms of some of the violence that happened? I know I was a little facetious, and I will go into it after you answer about why, but what are your thoughts?
I'm not going to tell people how to make a point. I will say that me personally, you're not going to see me catching things on fire and breaking windows. I'm not saying that property is more important than anybody's life, but that's just not where I try to make changes. And I'm not going to say that is not a way to get conversations going about making changes. I'm definitely not saying that those buildings are worth more than the lives of the people who have died. Like, what's the awareness that's being created? But I'm not going to say like, yay, do it. It's conflicting, right? Because you go into, rioting is the language of the unheard people. Yeah. And I know I'm paraphrasing a quote by somebody who's much wiser than me. But so that's where it's like, I'm not going to try to shame anybody for it, because I'm not in that person's shoes. I personally don't do it, though. I can't talk myself into being okay with hurting somebody else's business or really, it's not even about the business aspect of it. I'm not a very violent person, and I try not to go that way. That's just me, though. But what about you?
Yeah. Kind of in the same boat. I think when it comes to protesting, whether we like it or not, sometimes violence will work. And I don't think that should be the tactic that is used in this particular case, because of what we are seeing. The fact that, a select few people are going the violence route is changing the conversation from these people are protesting to the cops should, stop them, without having the conversation of what's in between. The fact that there is ample evidence that the Portland Police Department, like when they talk about in the news that, protesters have thrown Molotov cocktails, they've shown pictures of those Molotov cocktails. How many Molotov cocktails do you know are made in plastic bottles? Not many.
It seemed very, like, not smart.
Yeah, and yet, like last summer, for instance, they claimed a few times that Molotovs, quote unquote, were done in plastic bottles. Just like, no, they weren't. You were looking for an excuse, and somebody, this is a nuanced answer. There is no yes or no. Like, yeah. like hearing the news about my old employer getting fire damage, I loved it. I was so happy. The only thing that disappointed me was that there was not a managers meeting going on at that same time. But having said that, I don't endorse the violence. I don't think people should resort to violence to make their point.
Right.
I wouldn't want to be on this person's jury or anything, but I don't endorse the violence, and yeah, again, we're talking, people were more upset that, potentially some iPads may have been hurt than over the fact that the Portland Police Department for a long time is clearly needs some reform. Not some, a lot, and just, using the violence works in their hands, and just, there are going to be people that do it and they take that responsibility upon themselves. But overall, I think they do hurt the message, because it the critics will come back, well, do you support that? Do you support that? Of course I don't support that. I don't support that. People should, protest peacefully. But then again, it's like when you have the Portland Police Department that will call a riot just because somebody coughed the wrong way, and I'm being facetious there, but they looked for the least possible bit of provocation to declare something a riot, and it's just, there's a lot more going on here. Just, people need to be aware of the fact that the little bubble they live in is not necessarily what the world really is. And, it's good if you can say you have black friends and whatnot, but when you constantly support the police, when there is evidence after evidence after evidence that they don't treat black people the same way as white people, you're part of the problem. And that, it's either change or get the fuck out of the way, so people that, know what they're doing can get in place to actually make some changes. But, are we going to be able to do that with things the way they are in Washington? No, because things are slowly getting back to normal. And just like, hopefully we get some major arrests of some prominent Republican officials before 2022, because it could very well go back into the Congress could very well go back into Republicans' hands, which reverses a lot of stuff that we're already trying to reverse now. And have a little
That's
empathy.
where we will go. We'll go back to reminding people to vote. Like, vote not just on presidential years, because that's where it's like you can make a difference and stuff like that too. But yeah, I mean, ideally, I would love it if all of world's problems could be solved in a non-violent way. I'm the one that wants to sit in a room and is like, oh, well, okay, well, this training program for our police is just not working. So what are we going to do? Or like, maybe there needs to be a psych evaluation to vet out, like, possibly if you do have like a way to tell maybe if somebody might be a little racist, maybe don't make them a police officer. Like, maybe we need to have some higher standards for who does this job, especially if they are going to carry guns, which, as long as people have access to them, I do personally agree that they should be able to carry them. I haven't fully been convinced that that they should be expected to defend my community in a situation where the community can buy guns but they don't have one. That's what I'm saying. Like, it'd be different if they actually like did a full Australia here and said, boom, America, we don't have guns anymore. Then I would be more open to the topic of them not having it at all. However, should that be in the placement of where your dominant hand wants to go over your non-lethal one being on the non-dominant side? Maybe we need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because taser being where you're least likely to reach, like with your left hand, like, come on, you can put it somewhere else where the least lethal option can be more readily available than just the one on your hip, which is the lethal one. But that's a whole other, like, see, to me, it goes into the, can we have conversations about this? Because as long as people can have guns, I totally understand why, and personally feel like, yeah, okay, that's one I can't really argue.
Yeah, I mean, hearing, it's like there was another cop in Minneapolis that shot a kid, and they claimed that they mistook their gun for their taser. I've not picked up a handgun or a taser before, but it's like if they both have very similar feeling.
Totally different.
Obviously, yeah. I mean,
it's totally night and day difference. However, if I may, really quick, But understand what we understand about mental health, right? And how the brain works when it is panicked, when it is scared, when it is overwhelmed with fear, it's not going to go towards the logic brain of saying, oh, I need to pick my least lethal thing. It's going to go, oh, I'm scared, I'm reacting. And that's where I'm not saying it excuses it at all,
No,
but
no,
I'm
no, no,
saying
no,
that
no.
this really needs to open up a conversation of either you need to somehow vet or train where that's not going to be a thing, or consider a different placement and see how that goes, or consider reducing like how many officers can carry, or you know what I mean. There's more conversations to have than a strict there should be or shouldn't be is the only thing I'm putting out there.
Yeah, because let's be clear. I mean, I don't know the cop in question, so
Yeah.
to me to say this cop is racist would just be ignorant because I don't know that person, so until there are facts put out to the public indicating that she was a card-carrying member of the KKK, I have to chalk this up as a very unfortunate accident. It's human error, but on the flip side, very preventable in a lot of ways because
Yes.
like in generally, like cops to become a cop, what didn't we talk about it before? Like 28 days on average around the country of training you need, whereas in other countries, at minimum, you would be getting the equivalent of an associate's degree.
Exactly.
I think continued training is very much in order, and I don't consider that a bad thing. I think consistent weapons training, should be definitely looked into as well. And I think the most important thing too, I think it was kind of brought up in the Sandra Bland case, and John Oliver's talked about it on a number of occasions. And that's like when police do a raid, for instance, they legally don't. All they have to do is this is a raid before they bust in. They don't have to wait for you to open the door or whatever. And I'm sure the police logic is they don't want to give the criminals chance to get weapons to shoot back. But if you were not giving a person an honest chance to surrender peacefully, you're just busting in guns a-blazing right away like this is Grand Theft Auto in real life. No, I mean, it's like my tax dollars go towards this, and it's at the end of the day, there needs to be some protection from murderers, from robbers, from legitimate threats out there. Like defunding the police and getting rid of them is not going to make crime go away. Crime will still very much be there, and we will need people that will take care of that. But what we can ask for and what we should demand is proper training for them and hold them to a higher standard. I mean, like qualified immunity, my opinion, kind of needs to go away. I mean, it's like they're not teachers in this. It's like on the one hand, like teachers have like tenure and stuff like that, especially on the elementary side, because parents can be assholes and like they didn't give my little Billy an A, so she's a bad teacher. Fired. No, I believe there should be some protections for unreasonable type of things, but the only reason Derrick Chauvin put his knee on the guy's neck and didn't care was he felt he can get away with it.
Yeah.
Even with the camera going.
I just have this feeling here that we don't need the whole qualified immunity thing. Like, I think it's pretty clear when an officer is, had to choose to shoot like somebody who is trying to finish a mass shooting situation. I don't see that family standing a fat fucking chance at actually proving that officer did a wrong by shooting the person who was actively shooting other pedestrians. You know what I mean? Like, but just throwing it, I'm just saying that I don't think we need qualified immunity because that's a pretty clear case. And I think a lot of times it would probably be very clear. So I don't understand the purpose of it. But going to a statement that you made about being a taxpayer in training, it's like, as a taxpayer, as somebody who pays for this, yes, I do agree. I would, if some of that funding with the reform goes into requiring more training, more than that 28 days, like nurses, there was like a meme I had seen at one point putting up like, dude, nurses have to go through this and this and this and this and this. Why is it that our average police officer only has to do this? And I might try to go dig and find that because it was a very good point and somebody put it way better than I did. But like one of my questions is with this non-lethal option, like how often do they actually train on that? There's not a lot of information on their training. If you're lucky, you can find some, and that's if they're being open about it. And I will admit, like, I don't try super hard to look into it, but if it takes thousands of repetitions of a behavior to make muscle memory, how much more often are they training to draw with the lethal versus the non-lethal? We can ask questions like that when it comes to fine-tuning training. Would it be better to put the non-lethal option, like, still accessible to the dominant hand, but on the chest instead of over where you're reaching awkwardly across your body or requiring to use your non-dominant hand? Because why not try to train to prevent when it does genuinely happen by accident or by out of fear reaction, etc.?
Let's give this woman a benefit of the doubt too. Let's say, and we know it's not true, but let's say the taser could, in reasonable hands, if someone was blindfolded, could fool somebody into thinking that was a gun. Why not have a different type of taser that doesn't feel like a damn gun? You know?
If that's the case. Personally, yeah. I've held them, and I have not held one that feels that way. It's a totally different feel, it's a totally different handle, different situation. But yeah, that was where, when I had heard about it, it's like, well, a panic state brain, if this human is seeing somebody and thinks that they are literally in danger, I could understand panic doing something. But if we go back to where we find, like, oh, nope, they were active in this forum, in this group, and they were way against, like, all of this type of, like, they were super racist, like, oh, okay, well then, yeah, then that should have been better vetting. Like, I'm saying, like, we can talk about both, right? We can talk about, like, maybe trying to figure out how to not put this kind of quote unquote power in the hands of people who maybe shouldn't be put with that power. But could we also look at the training and encourage better practices for people who are genuinely trying to be good cops? I do say that knowing nothing about this woman. I know you've just expressed the same thing. I don't want to assume that all cops are bad. That's not a reality I am just in today.
Yeah.
So if she is genuinely a good cop, and if this is horrible training, should there totally be repercussions for what happened?
Exactly.
Yes. Just like it's no different if, I totally accidentally ran over that bicyclist. There's still repercussions for that.
Or if you work in a computer repair place and something you do erases all of a customer's data and they fire you, guess what? You're responsible for it. Doesn't mean you did it on purpose, but
you can be sued for it still. There's still repercussions. There are negative consequences for certain things, and I'm not saying that a lack of training excuses somebody's accidental death.
But that does not necessarily equate her to being a racist until the facts present that.
Exactly. Like, vehicular manslaughter is a thing, and it's not that's usually, like, the intent was that you were driving and you killed somebody with your vehicle. It wasn't that you were intentionally trying to run them over.
Right.
But there's still, like, there's consequences for that. So I'm not saying, like, lack of training excuses any consequences from happening to this person. But should maybe this overall conversation lead to talking about both reasons being looked into and how to prevent both, like, reasons behind this happening from happening? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what changes we can make. If it was an accident, let's talk about better training. If it was, like, this person maybe should have been vetted better in a background because they seem to always have feelings against black people, then we need to talk about that too. Both sides.
Yeah, and because it's not going to help things if all cops are labeled as racist. I mean, but we also have to, as white people, we have to respect the fact that minorities in this country don't trust them. And I guess the best way the best analogy I can offer would be it's much more extreme, of course, but it's kind of like how some women think about guys in general. I mean, guys in general are fucking assholes. There are exceptions to the rule, but but generally guys can be assholes, and a guy, if he is truly trying to be a nice, respectful person to somebody, has to accept that, and accept that sometimes something, an innocent thing that he did, maybe, taken a different way, just because somebody had a different experience. And I think in this case we have to accept that as well. I think, yeah, realistically, anybody realistically, yeah, if you got somebody in your house trying to steal stuff, or having a gun on your family, you want somebody official there to stop them, and it doesn't matter your race on that. But you also, if you're a black person and there's a higher likelihood that the cop bursting in the door is just going to be shooting first and asking questions later, I can see where, I can see where they would have that hesitation about not wanting to call the police, or, if they've been hassled. The driving while black thing is very much a real thing. And, man.
Yeah, see, and gosh, just so many opinions on traffic stopping in general, because it's become kind of a high tense situation for people now. Like, and why? Why do it? If that's the most dangerous thing a cop does, because that was one of the arguments that is reading kind of both sides that I like to do, of, an officer shouldn't need their handgun, during a traffic stop, was the point, the first comment that I read. And then you go into it, and it's like, well, they talk about that's some of the most dangerous part of the job. And I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting information, because if we've got cameras and radars and ways to send tickets for moving violations like through the mail and let it just be appealed in civil court, win-win. Like, hey, there you go. Let's get rid of the dangerous job and use some of this freaking technology. Like, sure, it's a little bit easier to fight in court or whatever, but there's also people that just by putting the signs up that, hey, this is a radared area, like, it can curb the behavior. And if it's safer to do that than to put a physical human being with a gun and a taser in their cop car to manage it personally, like, why not utilize that more and take that off? So, see, again, I'm for, and I totally understand a distrust in the system by people who have been, not felt, been oppressed by that system. I totally understand that. But I think that is where people, that if we do have the privilege of not feeling that way, because a lot of us do have the privilege of not feeling that way, why not do what we can to make changes? Like, talk about the training and talk about the vetting. So that's where I don't feel comfortable telling people you shouldn't be violent, because, see, I'm not every person. And so from my perspective, where I do have some belief in voting and a belief in changing things and in a belief in reform, that's why I don't want to necessarily do the violent thing. But I'm still not going to tell people that that's not a way of trying to elicit change, especially when you look at, like, history, basically anywhere in history, right? Yeah. I was going to say women's suffrage. A lot of what actually got change to happen involved some violence. Like, it is in our history. So that's where, like, oh, Tracy can't take a stance on it. Like, no, I'm just saying I can't speak for everybody's intentions for where they pick how they make people aware of a problem. Yeah. I can say that I am aware of it, and yeah, if it comes down to making changes, I'm very pro it. I am very pro reforming the police, and I will always be clear about that, and I will stance on that.
Yeah, because it's not. I don't get this attitude of you must support everything the police does or you are 100% against the police. That is ridiculous. I mean, think about how many instances over the years of cops that have been proven to have lied. It's human nature. I'm not going to go off and say that it does have its history in racism. Yes, I get that, systemic racism, but it's tough. It's tough. Yeah. We can't sit back anymore and just hope things get better, because with things in this country are going to get worse before they're going to get better, financially at least, because of the repercussions of how bad the pandemic has been handled here. You're going to have a ton of people trying to declare bankruptcy, but as the latest Last Week Tonight has shown, some people can't afford to go bankrupt. And even if they do try to go through the bankruptcy procedures, you have parasitic lawyers that are going out of their way to kind of steer people towards a Chapter 13 bankruptcy when a Chapter 7 would better suit them. And, things like that. And there's a lot going on. We got to keep fighting.
Yeah,
we're not.
and that's where it's like, by the way, please don't get upset if somebody is not on your brand of activism. There are a lot of problems in our culture. We are by no means close to perfect where we can say, oh, just this one thing needs our attention. So just to end the PSA there of personally, I feel as long as you're kind of standing for something and being willing to kind of work towards some changes, that put your efforts towards something good. That's all I'm gonna say. But don't slay people because they're not on your specific change. It's hard to phrase that one, I guess. I just think as long as you're working towards something, it's good. I just feel bad when people are like, oh, but you need to be for my thing that I am pro. It's like, well, but you're for that. But if nobody's for this other thing changing, maybe it's also good to fight for children's rights. Just throwing it out there. But also fighting for Black rights and LGBTQ, queer rights and things like that. Let's just keep fighting for rights. Can we do that?
and not because I'm glad you brought that up, because I immediately thought of John Cleese and some of the blowback he got for being accused of being a TERF simply because he said he was not knowledgeable enough on trans issues to feel comfortable speaking about it. I thought his response was very articulate, and it wasn't it wasn't a J.K. Rowling type of response. It was just, I don't feel I'm the right voice for it. Isn't it what people want celebrities to do anyway? I mean, the common thing you hear about people and celebrities is, shut up, man, you're a celebrity. And yet the one time a celebrity says, I don't feel comfortable talking about it, all of a sudden he's a TERF and against it. Just...
Yeah, and that's sad because that's so to the tune of John Cleese. I love John Cleese. It's no secret. I love his quotes. I love his stance on humor. Love, and that makes sense. Did that happen recently? Some of this coming out?
A couple of months back. Yeah, it was around the time I think that J.K. Rowling. I think she put out a piece a few months back or something like that. We talked about it on the show when it happened, but it wasn't a long piece.
Gotcha. Yeah, he's really funny. I like him. I love his stance on humor and stupid people. He loves to talk about stupid people. He had a really good zing on Fox News. But I love John Cleese. There was a quote that I had shared where he was talking about that he doesn't cater his humor to stupid people because when he makes a joke, he has to think to himself, will smart people get this joke, or will one or two stupid people choose to be offended by it? And if my answer is only one or two stupid people are going to be offended by it, well, I'm sorry, stupid people. There are certain disadvantages to being stupid, and that's I loved that. If you're going to choose to try to find something bad in somebody's statement, then I think that would be kind of that disadvantage of being stupid that he's talking about. So I think that's very much it's funny to me that people are taking oh, him saying he doesn't want to talk about it, well, that means he's against it. Because he's more or less talked about that's just kind of stupid to jump to that. So I could see, to me, it's just kind of funny that, of course, him of all people saying I'm going to choose not to talk about it because I don't think I'm that person, and then getting that attitude back that he's very openly talked about being against.
Oh, that reminds me, I forgot the name of it, and I know you probably haven't read it, but I guess in the late 70s, early 80s, he did a book with a psychologist about children and growing up. And once we get off the air, I'll look for it. But I remember reading a part where he talked about how children, when they're very young, have a god-like attitude in a lot of sense because they feel because they are so new. And I'm mangling it because it's been a long time. But I remember after reading that and telling that to my ex-wife, I was like, "That's not true." I was like, "Shut up! You didn't read it, you dumbass." But anyway. Yeah. All right. So I think we'll wrap things up here. Yeah. There we go.
Leave it on with just be a person, be a human, maybe stand for some good changes in life, have a passion that contributes to society, people.
Yes. Work to help people. don't try and fall into the trap of tribalism. You know, if people on your political side of the fence are doing something stupid, like Nancy Pelosi continuing to profit financially off of her job. I guess it was revealed that a couple weeks before a major government contract to Microsoft was announced, Nancy Pelosi and her family made like a huge stock purchase and ended up getting a lot of money. And she was also one of the people too that bought stock in companies that benefited greatly from the pandemic. She has a long history of profiting off of her position, and that is sick. That is evil. That was sick when Kelly Loeffler did it. That was sick when Senator Perdue, the two Georgia senators, profited off of their position, off of people dying. It's sick when Nancy Pelosi does it. And if anything, what I would just say to people, just defend what is right. And that what is right is that people that are in positions of power should be working for every single citizen in this country. It shouldn't be just for the ones that voted for them. The system should be set up to where, whether it's a poor person living in a box on the side of the road all the way to Bill Gates in his mansion, should be treated the same. And I, believe it or not, even though I don't think we'll ever get into a utopia or a heaven type thing, I think we can work towards some equality and make some major changes that will benefit a lot of people.
Yeah. Yes.
Just keep fighting. Just keep fighting.
Keep fighting, keep voting, keep doing whatever it is you do that you feel contributes to changing in a positive way. There we go. I think that was a nicer way of whatever the fuck I tried to say earlier. But yeah, just pick your thing, do good, don't do bad.
Well, I forgot the character name, but I'll take that line from Blazing Saddles, like, you talk as purty as a $20 whore. Anyway, that was a joke for me. Anyway, so we will wrap things up here. This coming Wednesday, we are going to have a watch-along. The results of the Battle for State Supremacy 2 were that the losers had to watch a particular film, and we are going to do that, but we're going to do it in watch-along style, meaning we're going to just set up the microphone and the computer in front of the TV and give our reactions as we watch it. So, come for the Texas jokes. And,
I don't know. I'm a little tempted to try to be involved in this somehow because I just think it's such a great bad movie. I would willingly watch it. So
yeah, well, it's on Amazon Prime. So it can definitely do. And that's an idea I've wanted to try before. It's another podcast that focuses on wrestling. On occasion, will do what they do is called a watch along, and essentially just play the movie during the recording. They don't play the audio of it for obvious reasons, but they just do kind of like a running commentary, and I thought that would be cool to try. So, this coming Wednesday, we will be getting that out of the way, so you'll be able to hear those wacky results. Then the Wednesday after that, the professor is going to be back, and she and I will be doing what we are going to call the Date Night Double. We're going to be reviewing some music again, her and I, and then just kind of give our opinions on what we think is going to be best for you. The first two albums that we are going to be talking about, there's a group called Pairs, and they have a self-titled album called Pairs. And we'll also be talking about a group called Bad Cop, and the album is called The Ride. So we'll talk about that and review some music from there. And then, of course, our regular hijinks here on Saturday, and we're going to be doing some other review stuff along the way as well. So anything you want to plug before we wrap things up?
No, I think I did plenty of plugging for Haunters Con, all the things. I'm good. I think I need dinner. Maybe I need water. I'm drunk on ginger beer.
Okay, well then, we will wrap it up. Thank you all for listening. We will see you all next week.
Cheers.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.